Multiple sources have reported that the Boston Celtics, Miami's opponent in the Eastern Conference Finals, have emerged as a trade partner for Kevin Durant. How does this impact the Heat's pursuit of Durant? And what's next for Miami if they wind up missing out on KD? We'll break it all down on today's Locked On Heat.
Our Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Tuesday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be watching or listening on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host Wes Goldberg. The Boston Celtics have emerged among teams engaged in talks on a possible deal to acquire Kevin Durant, according to multiple sources. This was reported by Adrian Wojnarowski and Shams Charania of The Athletic. We're going to talk about how that impacts Miami's pursuit of Durant, what it means for Miami's future, and whether or not they could put together some kind of a package deal that might be able to outdo what the Celtics could propose. This is what Adrian Wojnarowski is also reporting, however, that the Celtics appear no closer to acquiring Durant than others in discussion with the Nets, including the Phoenix Suns, Toronto Raptors, and Miami Heat. He also adds that Boston's proposed trade deal centers around 25-year-old Jaylen Brown, a one-time All-Star. The Celtics would send a combination of Brown, backup point guard Derek White, made expendable, of course, by Boston's acquisition of Malcolm Brogdon, along with multiple first-round picks and additional pick swaps. Before debating the strength of the proposed deal, two things to consider. First, according to Brian Windhorst, this was reportedly offered weeks ago, and no deal has been finalized yet. And if that's the case, then the second point, always consider, Wes, why these reports are made public. Who benefits from this? And I think the answer is pretty clear.
It's Brooklyn, right? And this is what the Nets have been trying to do for the last couple of weeks here is try to move the market a little bit, right? Because according to all these reports regarding Kevin Durant, initial offers were basically made within a few days as soon as the Kevin Durant trade request became public. And since then, if we believe what Brian Windhorst is saying, that this Jaylen Brown offer was made weeks ago, we know what Miami's offer pretty much looks like. It's Tyler Herro, whatever draft picks and whatever salary. And you know, we know what the other offers probably look like from around the rest of the league. But yeah, this is just there hasn't been much movement on this front, right? On the Kevin Durant stuff. The most that we've really gotten over the last couple of weeks is DeAndre Ayton, you know, basically re-signing with Phoenix and basically taking the Suns out of the equation altogether. At least it looks that way right now. And so this is just Brooklyn trying to maneuver their way around a market and try to make something happen, because if nothing happens, then I don't think anything happens with Kevin Durant, right? Like something has to give, whether it's Brooklyn budging on the price that they want for Kevin Durant or another one of these teams sort of upping the ante here. Until one of those things happen, we're probably not seeing KD get moved. So this is just, I think, at least Brooklyn, Sean Marks, and that entire front office trying to just make the market shift a little bit. And the Jaylen Brown name is an interesting one because of all the guys that we've kind of heard reported. You know, Pascal Siakam from Toronto, Tyler Herro, obviously, with Miami, Mikal Bridges with Phoenix, like name the player. Jaylen Brown, at least on paper, is the best prospect out of that group. And if this is Brooklyn trying to basically say, hey, look, if you want Kevin Durant, now the bar is set at Jaylen Brown. At least that's, I think, what they're trying to do.
Right. I'm trying to think about it from that perspective, too. It's just, who does this motivate to up their proposed package? Phoenix, I don't know that they can offer more than they already reportedly offered. For Toronto, it's whether or not you include a young player like Scotty Barnes that has all this potential, who might not realize it, but at the same time, Boston's willing to take that chance. And then if you're Miami, it's whether or not you try to include Bam Adebayo. That's pretty clearly where I think this is leaning towards. This is saying, you know what, Miami, you want KD. It's pretty obvious that you want KD. It's going to take you forcing Bam Adebayo into our hands in order to get that done. So it's just a little surprising that, again, with all the trade talks having grown stale over the last few weeks, that this report would come out now. But let's put that all aside, because I think that is something to consider. But at the same time, the proposed deals are out there. Miami's included. Now, looking at what the Celtics have offered, is that a better offer than Miami? And if that's the case, where does this leave Miami's pursuit of Kevin Durant? Because I think on paper, again, as you pointed out, Jaylen Brown is the best individual player there. But when you look
Yeah.
at the other players throwing in, Derek White, who showed up as a pretty significant backup in Boston's run to the NBA Finals, and of course, all that package, the three potential first round picks, two additional pick swaps.
Right.
That's a lot. That's a lot to
Yeah.
offer Kevin Durant. It sets the bar extremely high for Miami to try and hurdle.
Well, first of all, I think it's definitely better than Toronto's offer of Pascal Siakam. If Toronto offered Pascal Siakam. Now, if Toronto offers Scotty Barnes,
I
I
didn't know
think that's better than
Siakam was
anything
it.
else.
Siakam was the one who's been offered by the Raptors.
I mean, or maybe it's like OG and Anunoby. I don't know. All I
Yeah,
know
I
is
think
that
it
they
was
haven't
Anunoby.
offered. They haven't
Okay.
offered Scotty Barnes, and if they do put Scotty
Right.
Barnes on the table, game over. That's the guy that Brooklyn would go after. That's better than I think anybody that Miami could offer, or even
Well,
Bam Adebayo, just considering
it
that
fits the
Scotty Barnes is
time.
on that rookie contract. Yeah,
Right.
it
It
completely
fits the
resets the
timeline.
franchise, and you got a blue chip guy who's
Right.
probably going to make multiple All-Star games as long as
Right.
everything goes to plan with him. But I do think that, and I do think that it's better than whatever Phoenix can do. I like Mikal Bridges. I'm a huge Mikal Bridges fan, but I do think that Jaylen Brown's ceiling is higher than Mikal Bridges. So the question is it better than Bam Adebayo? No, I think Bam is a better prospect than Jaylen Brown. I think Bam, and I think you're right. I think this might be Brooklyn, maybe not specifically targeting only Bam Adebayo, but sort of being like, hey, if we're trying to get Miami's package and other packages to move up from Tyler Herro, OG, and whatever it might be, to move
Right.
up to the Pascal or to the Scotty Barneses and the Bam Adebayos, this is the way to get it done. I think Bam is a better trade chip than Jaylen Brown. If I'm Brooklyn, I would rather have Bam than Jaylen Brown. But
I
that's
think so.
also depends on taste, right? Like Jaylen Brown's a wing, Bam's a big. Like what do you kind of really want? I think it's at least I think at the very least it's even, but I would pick Bam. I think it's a legit question though if Jaylen Brown is a better trade chip than Tyler Herro. Because we got that Zach Lowe report last Friday saying that Tyler Herro's trade value is maybe the most polarizing in the entire NBA. I do
Right.
wonder where Boston or I'm sorry, where Brooklyn falls on the Tyler Herro trade value. Now, obviously, if they thought Tyler Herro was the greatest blue chip prospect that they could possibly get, maybe this deal is already done. So they're not so high on Tyler Herro that they're willing to trade Kevin Durant for Tyler straight up. And obviously, they want Bam Adebayo more than Tyler Herro. But you could make the argument. Look, Jaylen Brown's 26 years old. He's got 2 more years left on the extension he just signed, and then he's a free agent. With Tyler Herro, he's 22. He's up for an extension right now. If you trade him to Brooklyn would be in charge of that extension, which has value to it, and he'd be under contract for 2 more years, and he's 4 more years younger. Jaylen Brown's 25. He'll be 26 by the time the next season starts. So I don't know. I still think Jaylen Brown is the better prospect, but I think when you consider the whole value of it all, just Jaylen Brown and Tyler Herro with the contract and the age and everything that you're kind of looking at here, like if you move Kevin Durant and presumably Kyrie Irving, you're not very close to competing. Tyler Herro buys you a few more years and you get the contract, whereas Jaylen Brown could walk away in 2 years if you're Brooklyn and you're not competitive at that point.
Unless you lean into what Lowe was offering and reporting, basically, well, maybe not reporting, but let's say speculating to some degree, that his potential around the league is viewed as having plateaued because of his limited athleticism and the fact that he's not going to take an incredible leap in terms of athleticism. He's not going to grow an additional 3 inches in wingspan or anything like that. Like he can put on some muscle, he can get a little bit slightly more explosive and maybe improve incrementally in some other areas of his game. But overall, when you're looking at just the pure athleticism and the potential that's added to that athleticism or that's unlocked by that athleticism, Jaylen Brown, Scotty Barnes, certainly Bam Adebayo, all those players have a lot more upside than Tyler Herro.
Yeah, like it comes down to what Brooklyn really thinks of Tyler Herro, and obviously they don't think the world of him, or else this KD trade would already be done. It is worth noting though, the latest betting odds, they came out right before you and I started recording here Monday afternoon. Still had the Heat as the favorites, still and Kevin Durant, if not the Brooklyn Nets, if Kevin Durant's traded, still had the Heat as the favorites, and the Celtics they had moved up to second outside of Brooklyn behind Miami, but still Miami's implied probability basically being 23.5% chance that they are the ones with Kevin Durant, while Boston's implied probability is about 21.1%. So just a smidge off, but you would have thought on the heels of all these reports that Boston would have just leapfrogged Miami, and that hasn't been the case, at least on the betting markets.
Yeah, I guess the name Bam Adebayo is still worth moving the needle there. So it's something to consider. But we'll look ahead to what happens next for the Miami Heat. How do they adjust? How do they respond? And if a deal with the Celtics is finalized, then where does that leave the Heat in their quest for a title? But before we do that, just a reminder that Built Bar has unloaded the new coconut brownie chunk puff for the people who loved, the brownie chunk Built Bar. Now they've gotten the puffs treatment, covered and surrounded by marshmallow, still covered by 100% in chocolate. Great taste. I know you're a big fan of the bars, Wes. I mean, again, just so many delicious flavors to choose from, but this one takes it to a whole other level.
Yeah, it does. I mean, first of all, the original version of this was awesome, and now they've put it into a puff form. I really like the puffs a lot, though. If you haven't tried the puff format on built.com, definitely go
Yeah,
check it out. Whether or not you're a big fan of the original Built Bar, or maybe you weren't in love with the original Built Bar, you want to give it another shot because you've been hearing us talk about it so long, give the puffs a try.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you like marshmallows, and who doesn't like marshmallows, then this is the way to go. And again, even if you just want to go for the regular bars, and I can't blame you if you do, all of them covered in 100% in chocolate, soft, easy to chew, no extra taste or anything, no aftertaste that kind of, chalky or anything like that. They're all so delicious. It feels like you're eating an indulgent treat of some kind, but also getting all the nutrients that you might be looking for in a protein bar. So go to built.com right now, use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. You can get a mixed box of all your favorite flavors. Go to built.com right now. Use the promo code LOCK15 and you get 15% off your order of Built Bars. For the best NBA players, there's no such thing as an off season, and that extends to the best NBA podcasts. So make sure to subscribe to Locked On Heat on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. Thank you so much to everybody who subscribed to our YouTube channel. We've surpassed the 4,000 mark. Our next goal, 10,000 subscribers. How soon can we get there? That all depends on you. But I also want to shout out our colleagues over at Five Reasons Sports, although it might be too late by the time you hear or watch this. They're hosting a fundraiser in honor of Santiago Spoelstra, Eric Spoelstra's son, who it was recently announced by his mother, Nikki Spoelstra, that he's won his fight with Burkitt's lymphoma. Please consider donating the cause, even though their
Yes.
fundraiser itself may have already aired. Please consider donating. As a parent, it's the absolute worst thing I could imagine. So show your strength as part of Heat culture and help beat cancer once and for all. We're talking about Kevin Durant today and whether or not Boston's proposed trade package eclipses Miami, and I think that's pretty clear. So if they wind up going that route, despite the odds currently standing in Miami's favor, despite the possibility that Toronto includes Scotty Barnes or not, let's say it gets done because Boston has emerged all of a sudden as this dark horse candidate. Of course, Celtics fans already think it's a done deal, but that's go tune into Locked On Celtics if you want to hear that incredible perspective. But assuming that Boston gets this done, does this make the Celtics the best team in the Eastern Conference by a pretty wide margin? And has Miami's window for a title pursuit closed if the Celtics are able to acquire Kevin Durant?
If the Celtics get Kevin Durant, they're the best team in the Eastern Conference. And look, I according to Shams, they've offered Jaylen Brown and Derek White. Brooklyn countered by asking for Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart. So, but even a lineup of if the Celtics were to include Marcus Smart in whatever draft picks, then you're looking at, they just signed or they just traded for Malcolm Brogdon, who's a nice point guard. They still have Derek White if they end up moving Smart instead of Derek White, and Peyton Pritchard at point guard. So they've got options at point guard even without Marcus Smart. And then you
Right.
surround him with Jason Tatum, Kevin Durant, Robert Williams, and Al
Al
Horford.
Horford,
I mean, and you still have Grant Williams coming
Grant
off the
Williams.
bench. You still have some other guys. Yeah, that to me is the favorite in the Eastern Conference. It
You could have made
surpasses
that
Milwaukee.
argument. Yeah, you could have made that argument even before the acquisition of Kevin Durant, that with the acquisitions this offseason, the fact that, again, as an Eastern Conference finalist, they were the team to beat moving
I think
forward.
it's neck and neck
perhaps.
with them in Milwaukee or right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
good point. Like if you just throw Durant into the formula, that makes the case for the Celtics. I don't know. I don't know that we're ready to talk about this as a done deal. If the Nets really wanted Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant, this would have been done. I know that people like Marcus Smart and he's a good player and everything, but for this to be hung up on Marcus Smart, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. There's something else going on here. It might just be the fact that Brooklyn's just waiting out all the offers possible
We're
because
missing
they
something,
aren't
right?
in a rush to make a deal. Like
Yeah.
Shams reported that basically the deadline is the end of September when training camp starts. I don't know if that's true or not. I understand the perspective, But I don't see any reason for Brooklyn to feel like they have to get anything done by the start of the regular season. Now, if you're Boston or Miami, you obviously want something done by the start of the regular season. But that doesn't mean the Nets have to make a move at that point. They can take this into the regular season. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on here or why the Nets are waiting. But if they were over the moon about Jaylen Brown and draft picks and stuff like that, I feel like this thing would have already been done already. So I don't know what to make of this, but
I will say this.
But to answer your original
Let me
question,
add.
go ahead.
Let me add this. Sorry, no. I think. Look, we'll talk about this in tomorrow's episode because it impacts another player on the Nets roster. But my feeling is that the Nets don't want to move Kevin Durant. Like, I know they're under no obligation to do so. Maybe they're just trying to figure out if they can jack up the price as much as possible. I understand all that, but it seems like things have already stabilized. Like, you're not going to be able to squeeze blood out of the 29 other stones in the market. Like, you're not going to be able to get more, players. I just don't see it happening. My feeling is that despite KD making that trade request, they may not want to move him at all. Like, and I can see why they wouldn't. Like, if your problem is Kyrie Irving and not Kevin Durant, why wouldn't you want to keep a 33-year-old superstar that's still in his prime and still gives you a chance to compete nowadays? I don't think they're necessarily blowing things up. You don't acquire Royce O'Neal if you're trying to blow things up. I think there's still the potential there to win. But anyway, let's move on.
Maybe.
What was your point?
No, that's a good point. Maybe if they think, hey, we can move Kyrie Irving as long as we still have Kevin Durant and whatever we get back for Kyrie, maybe we could still compete. Like, that's right. I think that's possible. Absolutely. I think this is interesting timing. And you mentioned the timing earlier on this Jaylen Brown report. Right. Is this maybe Brooklyn's last gasp to just see what else they can wring out of the market? And then at that point, they say, you know what? The offers are the offers. Let's go ahead and just take the best one left. Maybe. Like I said, something's got to give. Either Brooklyn budges or another team budges or Kevin Durant budges off of his trade request and ends up being happy. Because that's the other thing, too, is now there's some speculation. And again, think about who these reports benefit. Speculation that Kevin Durant might hold out if he's not moved. Now that we're hearing those reports coming out, who's that coming from? It's coming from Kevin Durant's camp, obviously, saying, yeah, no, I still want to get moved because there's this narrative out there that he's so much of a baller, so much of a hooper, that he wouldn't just hold out and not play basketball because he loves the game so much. That stuff was coming from the Nets and that organization. Kevin Durant, that does not serve him to be labeled that way, that he wouldn't hold out, that he would just play no matter what. As admirable as that might be, that doesn't serve his trade request, his wish to get out of Brooklyn. So, I don't know. Just feels like this is another thing that's trying to get the market to move a little bit, and we'll see if it budges.
Yeah. Okay. So the second part of this, let's say they're able to finalize things and they do acquire Kevin Durant, and then all of a sudden you've got that super team there in Boston. I think the question for a lot of Heat fans, the concern for a lot of Heat fans is that now you haven't acquired KD. It seems like Donovan Mitchell is unattainable. You can't make another move for a superstar. No other superstar is available just yet. All the talk about Dame Lillard, Bradley Beal, or anybody else just feels impossible at this point in time. And so now you're looking at this roster kind of being stuck with Jimmy Butler, older Kyle Lowry, Bam Adebayo, et cetera. Has your title for contention closed? And I think that's the concern for a lot of Heat fans, is that you lost to Boston, albeit a close series. But maybe that was based on the fact that Jimmy Butler had to play out of his mind in order to just remain competitive with a team that's already made incredible upgrades over the offseason and is poised to do so if they acquire Durant. And so you're looking at this team that has kind of become stagnated to some extent. Are they still a legitimate title contender, or are they just going to be one of these teams that's like, oh, they're good enough to compete for maybe a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference and no further? And go ahead.
No, the answer is yes. The window closes if Kevin Durant ends up in Boston, because look, I think that the window is closing right now if nothing happens for the Heat, right? But if Kevin Durant ends up in Phoenix, it's not as big of a deal as if Kevin Durant ends up in Boston and not Miami, because right now I think Boston and Milwaukee are the best two teams in the Eastern Conference, but we just saw Miami take Boston to 7 games. Milwaukee, if they're healthy, I still think is the best team, but the door is open at least if one of those teams gets hurt. If Miami is healthy at the right time and they're playing well, there's still a path to the finals. We haven't even mentioned Philadelphia with Joel Embiid and James Harden there for a full season and PJ Tucker and everything that they've done. I really like their offseason. And so you could argue that those are the 4 teams in the East to beat. But if you add Durant to Boston, man, like now you're hoping that now you're basically saying, all right, we need Milwaukee to get hurt in the playoffs. We need Boston to get hurt in the playoffs. We need things to go south in Philadelphia in a way that they haven't expected. Like, that's asking a lot. It doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means that you're asking a lot. And you've got to get the absolute most out of this group, right? You're a team without a real power forward on the roster. You need a substantial leap from Bam, another one from Tyler Herro, Kyle Lowry to turn back time a little bit, Jimmy Butler to repeat the historic kind of performance he had in the playoffs last year, which is not a guarantee because of how great it was. It's a lot of ifs, and usually it doesn't work out for teams that need that many ifs.
No, yeah, everything has to break absolutely right just for you to be able to. I mean, it might have already been the case anyway. Like,
Yes.
you did so much to
Yeah.
get to that point. You had the one seed, you had PJ Tucker, you acquire older Kyle Lowry, all those things that you do last season because you recognize how imperative it is for you to be able to make a strong run to the finals. And now all of a sudden, other teams in the East have improved and you have not. In fact, you would possibly argue that you've lost a significant amount because of PJ Tucker's departure. And so now so much has to break right. And it just feels impossible for Miami to be able to count on that. And I guess that's the next question then is if all of a sudden, if you're Miami's front office and you recognize that Miami's window is effectively closing right in front of your eyes this summer, what do you do next? Well, we'll talk about that in the next segment here on Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. And just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show wherever you get podcasts and to always leave a review. Just want to kind of tease a little bit. We've got some exciting projects in the work here. We'll be talking about a little bit more over the next couple of days, but really excited to be a part of that. So make sure to subscribe to the show if you want to continue to get the best coverage possible about your Miami Heat. So here we are talking about a likely or potential trade for Kevin Durant to land in Boston. He becomes a Celtic. Yes, they lose some depth because they give up Brown, White, or Smart or something else. But you know what? It doesn't really matter because now you've got an all-star in Tatum. You've got a great defensive player in Marcus Smart or Derek White or Malcolm Brogdon or whatever you've got. You've got enough. Boston becomes pretty clearly the best team in the Eastern Conference. And as we pointed out before, Philadelphia is very good. Milwaukee's very good. Toronto even is still very good. You can dismiss Atlanta as much as you want, but they improved as well. Miami stagnated to some extent here. And now you've got an older Kyle Lowry. You've got an older Jimmy Butler. What happens next? If Durant is traded to the Boston Celtics, what does Miami do next? And I think that's a huge question. Do you try to go all in and say, we're going to try to get as much as we possibly can out of this roster as constructed? Maybe we'll make an ancillary move somewhere around the edges there so we can try and improve this roster? Or do you just, I don't know, throw in the towel to some extent?
Well, I think most fans would just say, all right, you can't get Kevin Durant. Let Donovan Mitchell, let's say he ends up on the Knicks or whatever. I just don't see the way that Miami gets Donovan Mitchell. So these two guys are off the market. The obvious thing is, all right, well, go find a serviceable starting power forward, fill out the roster best you can, and just go for it. And there's power forwards available or, another front court partner for Bam. Maybe we phrase it that way, whether it's Miles Turner, John Collins, Harrison Barnes, Julius Randle. I mean, just there's guys out there available, whoever it is that Miami likes and thinks that they could get would be the obvious next step. But the part of that, you're going to have to trade a first-round pick, at least one first-round pick for any of those guys, probably any of those guys. Not to mention, Duncan Robinson and maybe some other salary, maybe a nice young player like Gabe Vincent or Omer Yurtseven or whatever. I don't know what the price is going to be on that kind of stuff. So you consider what it is that you'd have to give up. Certainly a first-round pick at the very least. Is that still worth it when you said that the Celtics with Kevin Durant would be the best team in the Eastern Conference? They're probably the best team in the NBA. This is a team that was just in the finals, took the Warriors 6 games. You put Kevin Durant on that team. That window is wide open for them for at least a couple of years. Cool. Let's say you go out and get John Collins. Great, man. You just spent a 2023 or a 2029 first round pick on John Collins, and now you're this Miami Heat team with John Collins. I like John Collins, but that team's not better than Milwaukee. It's not better than Boston. It's probably not even better than Philadelphia. And so I don't know. I just don't really know where you go. I think maybe you just sort of you don't throw in the towel because you just can't do that. Not with a team with Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry and Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro, who are good players, guys who are good right now. You don't throw in the towel, but maybe it is a little bit of a, you know what? Let's compete. Let's have some pride in what we're doing with Jimmy and Kyle and this group. But maybe your window shifts to the Bam Adebayo, Tyler Herro, Nikola Jovic type of window now, and you focus more on what can you do to get younger, to improve this core, and be able to make a run basically 2-3 years from now?
That's fine. I can see that. And look, we're talking about, and I don't think that the front office necessarily values first round picks that much, although they see some inherent value because if nothing else, even if the players themselves that they wind up getting drafted using those picks might not ever pan out, there is still some value to them as a trade piece. Something you can include along with another player
I'm sure
to
they wish they
acquire.
had more first round picks right now. You know what I mean?
Exactly, exactly.
So
The fact that they've cast them away as not haphazardly necessarily, but they did what they had to in order to
yeah,
build this roster. Now all of a sudden they're kind of missing a couple of key pieces that they would include in a future trade. Having said that, maybe those players, that you're looking to draft in the future, you're not going to be the 24th, 25th, 26th team best team. You're not going to have the late 20th pick in the draft. You're going to be more
yeah.
likely maybe even a lottery pick or something along those lines. So
2029,
you'd
who knows? Who knows what
yeah.
can happen? That's
So
a far away from now.
you'd want to be able to keep those pieces as much
Yeah,
as possible. And then if you're looking at this team built around Butler and you're not going to be winning anything else, then I wonder whether or not it's time for the Heat front office to consider trading Jimmy Butler. And I know a lot of Heat fans are going to say, "Oh, you're crazy, you're insane," and yet I still see some people chiming in saying, "You know what? If your window for the opportunity of title contention has closed, and you're just going to be a middling playoff team, and they've already done that, they've already gone this route with
yeah,
Dwayne Wade, and it cost him 2 years. And Dwayne, as much as he is happy that the Big Three era happened, he got another 2 additional championships and another 4 title runs. He misses out on the fact that he has said so. He laments the fact that his 2 best years, where he was arguably an MVP type player around
yeah.
the NBA, he was playing on really crappy borderline playoff teams. And having said that, you're looking at Jimmy in his prime. Does Jimmy still want to be here? We all love Jimmy Butler here in Miami. Jimmy, seemingly loves being here, along with
Yeah.
the kennel, the dog mentality, and everything else like that. But at what his age right now, and given how much longer he has to play at this level, and having just sacrificed so much over the last 3 seasons, from the bubble to that outing against the Milwaukee Bucks to everything he did in the last playoff run, does he want to stay here in Miami? And I think you have to consider the possibility that maybe just blow it up. And
Right.
as you said, kind of lean into the next phase of Heat
Yeah.
development where you've got Bam, you've got Tyler, you've got Jovic, you've got whatever other players you are left on this roster. You trade Kyle Lowry for sure. At this point, like, you're not going to win a title here. Why did he come here? He wanted to win a title. That's not going to happen. And then you start exploring potential trades for Jimmy Butler as well.
For practical purposes, you don't do that now, right? I think I just don't see how you've. And look, the Eastern Conference Finals trip last year, even the Heat's front office doesn't value that in the same way that Heat fans do, that keep telling me that they were a shot within making the
Yeah.
NBA Finals, and why did we even need Donovan Mitchell or Kevin Durant in the first place? I'll tell you
Second
why.
place is
Because
first loser. Yeah.
the front office thinks they do. That's why you let PJ Tucker walk in. It's why you avoid the hard cap. The front office believes it needs another star. So whatever you think, I'm going to trust what the front office thinks right now. And so if you can't get one of those stars, I hear what you're saying, and I do think that you need to maybe, and if Durant ends up in Boston and basically closes the pathway to the finals out of the Eastern Conference, it on paper makes sense to just be like, you know what, trade Kyle, trade Jimmy, blow this thing up. But you also were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and you just can't hit the big red button like that. But a year from now, you certainly can. I think you run it back. You let Tyler and Bam and all these guys develop and really, basically hand Tyler Herro the starting job, start that part of his developmental curve. And you're probably right. You look for deals for Lowry and Jimmy Butler maybe next summer. And you look at sort of the return that Utah just got for Rudy Gobert. Look, I don't know that you get that for Jimmy Butler because what Minnesota did was, borderline insane. But you could get, when we're talking about recouping draft picks, like the last few years for Miami has been trade whatever first round picks we can, unlock protections on this, wait for these ones to come available and all this stuff. And it's kind of been Band-Aid approach to basically try to get to the finals. And it just hasn't worked over the last 3 years. They've been in they were in the finals once and they were shot away from it again. It's gotten them close, but it hasn't delivered the trophy yet. And so there's only so much bandaging of this roster that you could do before it costs you all of your first round picks. And we're already seeing the ramifications of it. Miami doesn't have a ton of first round picks, and that's why they aren't going to be able to land one of these stars possibly. And so maybe there is value in saying, you know what, let's play one more year out, run it back, and then look at what we could get for Lowry, going into a contract year. Jimmy Butler is still going to be an effective player this time next season. And see what else you can recoup and restock the asset cupboard and start making those moves for whatever a Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro future looks like.
I can't believe. I mean, I know we're kind of speculating, and obviously we're just kind of putting ideas out there, but it makes sense. Like this is the conversation, and when you look at it from this perspective, Brooklyn got exactly what they'd wanted. Like we're stirring the pot here to such a degree by leaking out this information that even you and I, as just media members, are already looking ahead and saying, you know what, their window for contention has potentially closed. And if so, you start looking at, maybe even blowing up the roster as soon as 1 year from now. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you're looking at either blowing it up next year because you're not going to be able to win much this season, even if everything breaks right. And so much has to break right for you to be able to just get in contention.
One other part of this is worth mentioning. The reason Miami re-signed Victor Oladipo and Dwayne Dedmon and Caleb Martin in part was because these are tradable contracts too. And so I think that's the other part, practically speaking, why you run it back is because, if Durant is off the table and Donovan Mitchell are off the table now, maybe another superstar shakes loose by the time the trade deadline rolls around. And now you've got these other things that you can trade then that you can't trade right now. And so maybe there's let's call it a Bradley Beal type move. If you think that could get you over the top in the East, depending on what it is that you have to give up, maybe that's the kind of move you make by the deadline. But I don't think that you could seriously consider blowing it up, at least for a calendar year. But it is like when the Warriors got Kevin Durant, teams across the league basically just say, all right, I guess we just got to wait this out because there's no feasible way for us to beat this team. And so if you're kind of looking up at a Boston Celtics team that I think it wouldn't be as good as those 2017 Warriors, but man, they'd be really, really good for the next couple of years. That is something that you have to, as a logical and practical thinking front office, you have to think about that. No matter how much pride you might have as if you're the Miami Heat, you got to look at this realistically. And if Durant is on the Celtics, depending on what it costs, I don't think that there is a feasible path to the NBA Finals.
Well, I hear some voices out there coming from the internet here, already saying, but Toronto, they were able to do so. And they wound up losing, 40% of their starting lineup in Durant and Klay Thompson in order for the Raptors to be able to win that title. And look, that can happen every year. As you pointed out, as we've been talking about, Miami took advantage of injuries this past playoff run, and they could have made it to the NBA Finals if, that shot had fallen, if they had things had broken just a little bit more right for them. And that's a part of every playoff run. And so I totally understand that. But yet, again, if you just remove yourself from that way of thinking and things, and you look at Miami's realistic chances of advancing to the NBA Finals, not as clear as they were, say, a couple of days ago before the Celtics rumor came out there. So we'll see what Miami does next, whether or not they go ahead and decide to increase whatever trade offer that they've already got on the table to see if they can pry Kevin Durant outside of Brooklyn, or whether or not they consider resetting things for this next season. But either way, we'll be here to report on all of it. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. And for your second listen, get up to date on the latest news and rumors around the NBA in just 30 minutes every day. We have Locked On NBA. Locked On NBA is your daily update in just 30 minutes. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks so much for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, B.